Hey, folks, welcome. This is Barnabas coming to you live from TAAFI Central here in my basement. Now, we got a special treat for you guys tonight. We got Nick Cross and his brand new cartoon, The Clockwork Elves. And we have also Mike Valiquette, who's going to be moderating the whole thing from Cartoon North. Now, Mike Valiquette I've known for quite a long time. He's a happy little chap. He's award-winning director and producer. He's worked in many different studios. He's out in Ottawa now, which is amazing. He teaches at Seneca and Algonquin. And he's got his own cartoon company called Go Lucky, a boutique little studio. And as I said, he runs Cartoon North and Cartoon Animation Resources. So I'm going to throw it to him because he is the superpower, a superhero, and he loves superheroes. Let's give it up for Mr. Mike Valiquette. Mikey, welcome.
Well, that was that was an introduction. I'll give you credit for that. Hey, everybody! Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm legitimately just super excited to be sharing this film with you guys. To be having the opportunity to sit here and talk with Nick and let you guys talk to Nick too about the film, about his films in general. And pretty much anything else you guys can come up with within the allotted time. A little introduction for those of you. I don't think he needs a lot of introduction in this room, but I am going to set up Nick a little bit here for you. He is a Sheridan illustration grad, not animation. They were tweeting about you today, Nick, about this thing tonight, so they're very proud of you all of a sudden. He started out his animation career in Ottawa, working on lots of Nelvana stuff, primarily at Dynamite Cartoons, where I met him, where he also worked on a little show called Untalkative Bunny, and started his filmmaking career, making short films at the time, like T for Two and Maybe. From there, those films led to him moving to LA and working at Cartoon Network on a show that most of you probably know him for, Over the Garden Wall. Since then, he moved on to, I believe, art director for the in-house shorts department, the Cartoon Network shorts department. Nick, you can correct me on that. Most recently has moved on from Cartoon Network to Netflix, where he's working on something super special. It's been 7 years since his last film, Perihelion. And tonight we're going to watch The Clockwork Elves. So that's my introduction. Nick, welcome to TAAFI.
Hey, thanks. Apparently there's a lag. I don't know if I need to troubleshoot that, but anyway.
If you're watching it on two screens, yeah. It comes out a little later than us talking.
Anyway, yeah.
So Nick, you want to set up this film for us?
Sure. It's a cartoon that I made. It took me a long time because I was working on it. So when I moved to LA, I got like a full-time studio job, so my time was diminished, and so I didn't really have a ton of time to work on my own stuff. So it took me a really, really long time to make. It didn't take me 7 years, but it took 7 years in total, if that makes sense, cumulatively.
Gotcha.
Anyway,
so the way we're gonna do this tonight, for those, it's always tricky now that we're not doing this stuff with an audience. It's a little trickier. The way we're gonna do this tonight, guys, is Nick is going to. Well, we're gonna show the film right off the bat. At which point we'll go into a little conversation about it, and then about Nick's filmmaking in general. We will then get into actual process stuff. Nick has provided us with an animatic, designs, a lot of other stuff that we can take a look at, and he can talk through some of his process. And we'll dedicate a chunk to the process side of things here. And after that, I think we'll probably watch the film again, because there's a lot to absorb with this thing in a very short period of time. And then we'll jump to questions. So, again, I think, Nick, we'll let you explain it a little bit after the fact. Do we want to just get right into the film?
Yeah, I don't know how to set it up, so. might as well just show it and talk later.
All right, Barney, let's do this. Well, there we go. I actually have, I literally have it written here in my notes. Watch film, and then recover. So we'll give everybody, here, okay, let's just do one of those because we're not in person live, and give you a little round of this.
My new dog's here.
Who have you got there?
We got the COVID dog here.
Oh, you got a new one?
Yeah.
How many does that make now?
3.
3. Okay.
She's replacing one.
Yeah, you lost one, didn't you?
Yeah.
Sorry, man. Yeah.
That's all right.
Okay. Whew. All right. So I will. I'm watching the comments, and I guess there is on the stream. It's a little pixely, and some people are having a little bit of trouble with it freezing. We are going to play it again later on in this chat. So hopefully the Toronto internets are not quite so clogged. And we want to watch Nick's shower thoughts and drug trip smashed into one. Okay. So I'm watching the reactions right now because it's with a little bit of a lag, but we're going to get caught up, everybody at the same time. So, yeah, Nick, okay. What the hell did we just watch?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Well, I'm anticipating the question from our viewers. What was that?
Yeah. That's a comment I always get on all my films on YouTube. It's usually that, basically. I don't know. It's just so. I guess, like, if you want to get into the origin of it, the film, not the last film, but the film I did prior to this, called Pig Farmer. There's like some drug use in it, and like a character takes like this sort of like, it's not explicitly LSD, but it's like basically that, and he goes off on this killing rampage, and then I got criticized for portraying drugs incorrectly, and this one guy called me a rube and said that I should go out into the woods and take ayahuasca and learn about life. And I'd never heard at this point of ayahuasca, so I looked it up, and it just sent me down this rabbit hole of discovery about like what this actually is, this whole like subculture, and then that's basically, so this film is basically a response to that comment. Controlling the troll.
You offended the drug nerds.
Yeah, I guess so. Like I said, I didn't know there was such a thing as drug nerds until that point. Like, I didn't realize that people were like, that there was like it makes sense that there is a drug nerd culture, like they're like super specific, and you have to take drugs correctly and stuff. But apparently there is one out there.
So, what sort of research then did you do to correct this oversight on your part and explore this whole ayahuasca trip?
I just used Google. I mean, I didn't actually go out and try this stuff. I've never actually even seen it. I don't, I'm assuming my portrayal of it is somewhat accurate, but it's sort of like a weird thing because it's actually like a cultural, like the actual ayahuasca itself is like, like a Central American's like very specific, like cultural like thing. But I think that there's like people who just like turn into DMTs, like the active. I think the active molecule in it, people take that and call it ayahuasca or something. I don't know any of this stuff.
So your search history now, you're on all kinds of lists, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, this was a while ago, though. I mean, but yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Does anyone check that stuff anymore? I don't know.
Yeah, dude, this is amazing. Thank you for sharing this thing with us. It's really, it's been a long time coming, and it's a hell of a trip to watch. Like I said, we will get back to it and watch it a second time a little later on. But let's talk about the film itself. I mean, we were saying you've got this reaction to a comment on a previous film, which when I think if Barney did assign a little bit of homework today in the Discord server to try to get some people to sort of have seen some of the films that we're talking about, Pig Farmer being chief among them. Yeah, your work has taken this dark. I mean, it's always had an undercurrent of darkness in it, but kind of like Pig Farmer really kind of went graphic. The degree to which you depict this stuff now is really kind of there. There was always the subtle. I mean, not subtle. Your work is never. I would never really call your work really subtle, but you've really been plumbing sort of gore for the last few rounds.
Yeah, because it's funny to draw cartoon characters like getting brutally murdered. I don't know. It's just because I like doing things like I like using the language of like old Hollywood cartoons style, and that sort of like aesthetic, and then sort of like turning it on its head. So the best way to turn it on its head is to plumb the depths of horror, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it was always there. Your early stuff always had these kind of jarring turning points in them, and certainly using the really kind of classical language of cartoons to bring viewers in, make them feel safe, make them identify, really win them over to your side.
Right.
Yellow Cake does that tremendously well because it really feels like a classic cartoon. And then your not so subtle political messages would kind of, and that one turns a few times, I think, doesn't it? Like you've got a few jarring moments, like when the cat first comes in and grabs the building.
Right.
Then when we appear to be having a bit of a happy ending and the planes come pouring in, you kind of use that a few times. Mm-hmm. It seems you've kind of abandoned that to a certain degree. Well, that's not entirely true because this one's still, you're coming in with this cute character, this idyllic kind of scenario, similar to Pig Farmer.
Yeah. So that's basically the one theme that I consistently go back to over and over again, is the idea of like this idyllic world that gets turned into a hell. So, that's like my favorite theme, basically. So, I mean, like Yellow Cake was specifically about. I mean, it was made in response to like the Iraq War. Like that's when that was made. So there's that's the reason that was using that language. But I mean, each of them was about something a bit different. So they're gonna have different, symbol, like things happening. So, but I think like. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure that my films are going to be as dark. Like I made a lot of my films before Trump got elected, and I think since Trump got elected, the whole world became kind of surreal in a way that you can't really even caricature anymore. So it's kind of like you kind of want to do the opposite of that moving forward, just for the short term, just for your own sanity. It was fine when the world seemed like there was, it was predictable, but
when there was hope. Back when we all had hope.
Back when there was false hope, I guess. But you wouldn't be able to. There's no way you could. Like I always say, at this point, parody and satire is dead. There's nothing you can say that you would think is like that's absurd. Like, can you imagine if this like Veep or something like all these like political comedies and dramas that happened prior to Trump getting elected seem like ridiculous now because they're not even.
Well, I think that's the jarringness of the world we live in right now, and that's like there was a period in my life where things were kind of upside down, and I would wake up in the morning sort of with my general assumption of what goes on in a day, and then something so crazy would happen that day in my own personal life that when I went to bed that night, it would be like, well, if that happened today, what the fuck's going to happen tomorrow? Right. And I feel like the whole world is that right now.
Yeah.
Like it's just it's all bets are off, and so we're kind of collectively living through a traumatic experience, and hopefully not going to be carrying too much PTSD with us as a society into the future. But to your point, so your films have always been kind of like jarring in that way, and this one is no exception. But I'm like, are you looking for a new antidote? Are you looking for something else to focus on, to kind of how long can you do this with the world the way it is?
I mean, I think like everything that the stuff I do is just a reaction to whatever I'm experiencing at the time, and so I don't even know at this point, like I'm starting like thinking about making another film, but it's just like it's not gonna be any. It's just gonna be not any of this sort of stuff. I feel like it's just it's just gonna be a little calmer. I think because it's just the world's just too crazy, and I don't need to add any more craziness to the world. I think.
Well, in our previous conversation, we talked, and Troy's bringing it up right now in the comments about Black Sunrise. Black Sunrise being the feature film you started quite some time ago. And well, maybe you can just, as far as the status of that film and where your thinking might be today.
Right. So that I started writing that back in 2008. So at that time, like I was really like spent a lot of time getting into like conspiracy theory videos and just that sort of weird conspiracy theory culture that was sort of like a weird subculture on the internet. you could just watch videos about people like the Illuminati and all that sort of stuff, the New World Order. And it was just really fascinating that people believed in that. It just seemed absurd that people would believe that. And it was just like this weird subculture. And it was really fascinating. And I thought, part of it is I thought, wouldn't it be weird if that all of that was true? Like if the world they actually conceive and they imagine was actually real, what would that world be like? And so I was like, that would make an interesting film. But because it was like meant to be a feature film, it took so long that the world kind of caught up to it and overtook it. So, I mean, I didn't anticipate that someone would get elected president and actually believes all this kind of stuff, and that it would just get into the mainstream with like QAnon and all this sort of stuff. So that's basically it. It's like it's so out of date now because it took me so long to just get going on it that it's kind of obsolete. It would seem like a quaint relic of a bygone time. And also, there's a Netflix series that basically has the same premise coming out, so that put the final nail in the coffin.
Well, so not just someone else using your idea, but reality ended up using your idea. So it kind of kills it.
Yeah, I mean, once all this stuff kind of became mainstream, it was sort of like, well, there's nothing here anymore. Basically, so that's basically the short version of why I'm not going to finish that.
Right. So this film over these years, I mean, this was like sort of at this point, kind of, it feels almost like tying off that section of your work, essentially. Then, if it's because it feels like it belongs with Perihelion. It feels like it belongs with what you were doing with Black Sunrise. And if the world has changed around you that way, do you see more of this kind of work coming from you, or do you go somewhere else next?
Well, I think the main thing that I kind of like to do now is films that are less like completely narratively driven. You know, I kind of got into the idea of like Pig Farmer. There's like a moment where it kind of falls into montage and there's all this kind of weird stuff happens, and I was like, oh, I actually kind of like that, and so I kind of like am more interested in exploring that sort of thing, like just an entire film that's just montage, and that can tell a story in a non-narrative way. And so that's like my new focus, I guess. And that's what this one kind of is basically that. I mean, there's like a small narrative in it, but there's a lot of just, it just quickly descends into chaos. So.
It's interesting because the film itself is, well, how long is this one?
It's like 3.5 minutes or something. I'm not sure.
3.5 minutes? Yeah, so you've got a very compressed time frame to kind of do what you're doing, and it's interesting how I was rewatching it today, because that montage approach, that the non-linear stuff, and how you seed it into the linear aspect of the story. When your little elfie character, does that character have a name? No, just your elf thing. Okay, when it's climbing the mountain.
Well, it's not an elf. The title Clockwork Elves comes from the concept of like when you take DMT. So the idea is like, apparently this is all hearsay. Right. This is not my experience. This is like the people online, they claim that when you take it, everyone has a shared experience, like a shared like hallucinogenic experience, and which is suspect, but whatever. And part of it is you see these things that are called the Clockwork Elves. That's part of it. Is like you have this trip and you start to see these weird orbs that talk to you. And what actually got me interested in that was that there's like conspiracy theorists that believe that the elites of the world take DMT and all have this and collective experience, and the Clockwork Elves are real and tell them what to do. They're basically the Illuminati or the Clockwork Elves. There's a whole weird thing, like people believe all this crazy stuff about all this stuff. So that's where that title comes from. The character is not an elf; it's just a cartoon.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's a moment of nostalgia for that era of YouTube where those videos were so prevalent and less slick and less curated for you. There was so much crazy shit you could find so easily. and I admit it. I can sit back and crawl down that tunnel for a couple hours, and it's just harder to do it now. I'm glad at least those videos.
It's because it's more mainstream now. It's way too weird now because way too many normal people take it seriously. And the whole like Pizzagate and all this crazy like stuff just made it like it used to be a fun thing to sort of delve into, and that's just again it's been ruined by cases. You got to ruin everything.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be the calling card. Yeah, ruining.
Trump ruined everything, basically.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. But you've managed to stick it out in the States, though, so good on you.
Well, California's like Canada, basically. There's not much difference,
except it's on fire.
Well, yeah. So you have to, instead of snow, you have wildfires.
It's the cinders and the ash outside the window instead of the snowflakes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep this on track here a little bit and talk about your filmmaking in general. So you're getting to this point. I mean, you've been in the States for like 7 years now. You've been at Cartoon Network previously. Now you're at Netflix. I know your filmmaking when you started out your independent stuff. It was learning. It was trying to understand how this stuff worked, how the animation did back in the early days, trying to master it, and then it became kind of this outlet for you, away from the day job. Mm-hmm. Like let's maybe go back a little bit here. I met you when we were both at Dynamite Cartoons here in Ottawa. You were still pretty new to the business. We were doing a ton of Nelvana. Like I don't know how many leaves you and Troy drew in the background of Franklin the Turtle. Mm-hmm. I think Troy will probably chime in with some statistic in terms of the records you guys used to keep for yourselves. But at some point you decided you wanted to do this. Why? It's a fairly thankless thing. Independent film is a fairly thankless thing. Why? What was the point of doing this?
Well, I mean, like when I got into animation, like I took illustration and I never had any dreams or ambitions to be in animation. In fact, I kind of like didn't like it because I always liked animation growing up, but when I was at Sheridan, the illustration department had to share a space with the animation department, and it just did not like any of the animation students. Like it just felt really weird. Like the animation students just feel weird, and this is really mundane, but they always would hog the photocopiers with like stacks of paper, and they would be copying. Like from my perspective, I'm like they're just copying the same drawing over and over. I'm like, I thought they're supposed to know how to draw. Why are they photocopying? It was just that thing. I'm like, like a weird rivalry between illustration and animation because they were the one that everyone knew, and the illustration was like the poor stepchild or something. Anyway, I digress. But basically, I never really wanted to get into animation, and then it was Troy that actually got a job in animation when he moved to Ottawa, and basically, I was doing nothing, and so he's like, "Hey," he just called me up one day out of the blue after a couple of years out of school, and was like, "Do you want to? I got a job in the animation studio. Do you want a job?" I'm like, "Yeah." So that's how I got into animation, but I didn't have any training or anything. So I just kind of got stuck into drawing background layout because that's kind of a job you could sort of do without knowing a lot about it.
There was a lot of it to go around. Yeah.
Yeah, but when I kind of got into it, then I really found I liked it a lot, and because I always liked film and I like to draw, and it's kind of like this seems like the perfect art form because you can make a film. All you have to do is draw it, and it just seemed like a really interesting medium to work in. But I didn't know how to animate or anything like that. And then at the time, Graham Falk Graham Falk and the owner of the studio, Dan, had made a cartoon called Untalkative Bunny, and Dan was like, "Oh yeah, Graham, we just made it on my computer at home." I'm like, "We can just use a home computer to make a cartoon?" Like that just seemed crazy. And this is like mid-90s technology.
Yeah, so let's give a little context here to the people that are on this thread, because we're talking about 1995, 96 in that area. Yeah. In that area, the software just wasn't there. None of the stuff that exists today existed then. I think the Bunny was made like on an Amiga or some crap like that, the first one.
I don't even know how they did it. I mean, Yeah, I think so. But yeah, the technology that, so this would have been 97. No, wait, when was I? Maybe 98 when I started to do it. I was like, and that was a little better. I used Premiere and Photoshop to sort of like, but I drew everything by hand. But basically, I saw that you could do it, and I was like, oh, okay, I have a computer, I can make a film. So I just started drawing animation, but I didn't know how to do it. Like I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know how to space drawings. I didn't know anything about it. So I had books on like the Preston Blair book. I would just read it, and I had to like kind of, there was like a little tiny. So this is before the internet. So this is like there's nothing. You have to glean information from the most disparate sources. Like just it's crazy, like the world before the internet. So there was a book on animation, and there was a little tiny drawing or a little tiny photo of an X sheet in it. This is an exposure sheet. This is how you time your drawings. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, I see. You know, I was trying to. It's like reading the tea leaves of how to do animation, and I had Illusion of Life. That's useless. And then I would ask people at the studio. Like I asked like, I'm not gonna say her name, but she used to do the X sheets at the studio. I was like, oh, how do you do X sheets? She's like, you can't do X sheets. You have to go to animation school before you can do this stuff. And I was like, oh, that's like a weird thing to say. So I just set out to teach myself, but I didn't have any audio or anything. So I just took audio from a movie and just animated to that. And I had this idea. Well, so I had this idea like, oh, like I don't know how to animate. Like you watch like Japanese animation, and if it's subtitled, it would always be frustrating because you're reading the subtitles, you can't watch the cartoon, right? And I was like, oh, if you don't know how to animate, this actually works to your favor because everyone will just be reading and won't be watching how bad the animation is. So I took the Seventh Seal, the Ingmar Bergman film, which is all in Swedish, and I just made my own subtitles up, like a Monty Python type thing, and just animated to that. So it's two characters, and then they were sitting in chairs because I didn't know how to move characters. I didn't know how to move. I was like, I'm not gonna have characters walk. That would be too hard. Have them sitting in chairs, and they just have to move their head and hands and stuff. So that's how I did it, basically. And I just figured out how to break the track down. So how I broke the track down was, this is really crazy. I just remembered this. I timed the clip of dialogue, like the character say like some line in Swedish, and I had a stopwatch, and he would say the click with the stopwatch, time it, stop when he stopped. Okay, that was 3 seconds, and then I was like, well, I'm probably off. So I tried it like 10 times each thing, and I averaged it out. And then I knew, okay, so somewhere within this range. And that was how I broke the track down. So that's like insane. This is the crazy thing. This is nuts. That's nuts now. Like, you hear this now, and this sounds like insanity. Because now it's so easy to do animation, but back then it was
right.
I learned a lot doing that film. It was like a 1 minute little thing, and it's just whatever. But I learned so much. I learned about like how to do spacing of drawings and all that kind of. So it was like a huge crash course in animation. Long story short, and after I did that, I got hooked on basically making animation at that point. So, long story short, that's how I started.
It's interesting because it's also like it was a strange culture of animation then too. Like we were all doing pre-production. There was no animation here necessarily in Canada. I was coming out of Vancouver, where and like I said, everybody was doing pre-production, and Ottawa had this sort of abundance of animators because they had done. There was a couple features that came through in the mid '80s. There was animation that was actually happening there, so there was this kind of older group of real animators, and most of them were doing sheet direction at the time. But they treated it like it was this arcane knowledge that you could never grasp.
Well, I was told that. I mean, that's the thing. Like, they treated it like you needed to, like there was something you needed to go to basically a Sheridan College and learn animation in order to be an animator, which didn't seem right to me. Because, I was literally, I came out of Sheridan College illustration, and I'm doing background layout. So obviously you can be taught things on the job. Like this person could have taught me how to do it. Like it's just like
that's it.
It's like a sort of a job protection thing because they knew like, oh, there's not a lot of these X sheet jobs going around. I don't want some young whippersnapper taking my cushy, because this is like a cushy job for a lot of these people. Like I've subsequently learned X sheets. I've done X sheets like lots now since in the past 25 years, and you kind of learn, like, there's a lot of sheet timers that just kind of do it in their sleep, right? They just 8 frames, 6 frames, and they're not paying any attention to anything. So it was, and they get paid a lot of money to do it. So it was sort of like, I feel like it was a job protection thing as opposed to it being difficult to learn.
Right. So early on, I mean, spite is always a decent percentage of motivation.
That's pretty much everything I do is based on spite.
There's an allowable.
I think like a lot of the stuff I do is like because I was told I couldn't do it, and so therefore I proved that I could do it.
Most of my favorite people have similar motivation, including my wife. So this gets you into.
It's a good thing. If people tell you can't do something, don't take their word for it. Prove them wrong. That's what I always say. Because I mean, like, there's a lot of people that will always give you reasons not to do something. Oh no, you can't do that. And it's like no, nothing is that. So nothing is beyond if you really want to do it. It doesn't matter what it is. Look at Elon Musk. People like the guy has a rocket company now. That is like insane. That a guy who just co-founded PayPal now it has the most like is launching like rockets into, say we want to be Elon Musk. I'm just saying like, I'm sure plenty of people said that's insane to do your own rocket company. So anyway.
And it might still be.
Hey man.
More power to him. Okay, so let's walk through it a little bit then. So you're making these films. Okay, spite is some good motivation. Learning the craft is some good motivation. You're kind of demystifying something for yourself that you grew up admiring. Oh, great. And you've got some things you're saying in your films that you're not having an outlet for in your daily work. Now, early on, it was mostly kind of like you said, like layout, those kinds of jobs. You made the shift into storyboarding as a full-time gig, and then moved to Oshawa. And that's when it became really, this is what you have a routine. This is what your life is. You're making films and you're doing this service work. And you had a good thing going for a while that way. There was a lot of output over those years. The films got increasingly complex. The first jump from T for Two to maybe was maybe a bit of a big leap, maybe too much of a leap initially. Still one of my favorite things, but it's you watch it with two eyes. You watch it with the fan eyes, the love eyes, and you watch it with the critical eyes. But then as you move through that, so the films became you. That was what your art was. That was what, you were getting up at 6 a.m. and doing Babar boards and then switching over to your films in the afternoon. And that was a good system for a while. And that's, I think, where most people got to know your work because it was a fairly steady output of work.
Yeah. Because it was an easy thing to do. Like I worked from home. And so, I could set my own hours. So I just would work. I guess I could say, most of my storyboarding jobs, I would just work 4 hours a day. Like I could knock out a Nelvana board with as basically a part-time job. And so I had all this extra time that I could just devote to my own work, which kept me sane because a lot of that stuff was not the most, how do I say this?
You just
nicely, but it wasn't that challenging. It was sort of like, okay, this, I needed a creative outlet that would give me something like that was mine as opposed to just, doing some relatively banal children's entertainment.
But it's interesting. Like not everybody needs that. We're surrounded by people in this business who, they do the day job and that's it. That's the full thing.
Yeah.
To need to do this thankless thing essentially. Because early on, you had the festival circuit, you had a place you could put things that way. You'd get some immediate response. The internet was still growing. YouTube was still coming around. But it's easy to discount it because it's just the way you are and it's just the way you live. But there's a lot that goes into being the kind of person that has to make a fucking film.
Yeah.
Like you're not, you got your dogs and you got Marlo and then you got these films that you make and that's a huge commitment.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's like a hobby. So, everyone has, like, I'm sure, everyone has something that they do. They don't just like do nothing, right? They don't work and then go home and just do nothing. I'm sure they do something.
Well, some people are drug nerds.
Not everyone wants to make a film. That's fine. You don't have to. I mean, it's kind of it is a thankless job. I mean, it's sort of stupid to do this stuff. I always equate it's like ships and bottles, right? Like, I mean, people spend a lot of time and meticulously putting the ship into a bottle, and then you're done with the ship in the bottle, and you stick it on a shelf, and people look at it and say, "Oh, cool! How'd you get the ship in there?" Right? Like that's the question. Oh, I do this thing, and then they kind of like, "Oh, okay, I don't care." So that's like that's animation. That's like basically what making animated films is. It's just you put a lot of work in. People are like, "Oh, how long did that take you to do?" I was like, "Oh, wow, yeah, that's about it." I mean, you have to really want to do it, and you have to get some satisfaction out of actually doing the actual work, like the day-to-day, frame by frame work. Yeah. If you don't love doing that, you're not going to like it because it sucks. It's really, it's drudgery, So,
and that's that's the challenge.
Yeah, but the way I look is once you have it done, you have work that you can point to. It's like, oh, this is my work. This is mine, as opposed to doing work for commercial studios, which is fine, and but it's not yours at the end of the day, right? So this at least is mine that I can point to. It's like my work is paid. Like the amount of work I've done for commercial work is far more than I've done for my independent work, but you would never know. Like what did you work on? Oh, I worked on The Day My Butt Went Psycho. I did 10 boards on that. Oh, okay. So there's like thousands of drawings went to the show that probably no one's seen.
Right. So, but then, and this is still part of the whole the route. But then the making of the films is what has then driven your career out of what was sort of like the day job drudgery of, and I'm just going to keep saying it, Babar boards, for the sake of just lumping it all in together. You got the call.
Right. Well, I think like almost all of my jobs, like even storyboarding, I think I kind of got that job. Well, maybe, but I mean, a lot of the jobs I got were from my independent, like personal work, and people seeing that and oh, you can do that. Okay, I'll give you a chance to do this. So I think that was me learning how to do stuff. It had multiple reasons. Like I did my own personal work to learn how to do things and get better and hone my skills. So the things I would learn, and it was like a feedback loop, right? I would learn it on the job. Like, okay, now I'm doing storyboards. Okay, I'm learning this, blah, blah, blah. That goes into, feeding my films and stuff like that. Or working with like people who are really good, and you kind of learn from them, and, your skills get better because, you're learning stuff. So yeah, I think a lot of the films I've made have gotten me different jobs. And basically the reason I'm in Los Angeles is because of my films, because Pat McHale, who created Over the Garden Wall, he wanted me to paint backgrounds because he saw Pig Farm. He's like, oh, can you do stuff like that for his short that he was doing at Cartoon Network? So that's how I got that job, basically.
So you take off for LA in the before times, and your independent film output essentially dries up.
Right. Basically, yeah. Because like I guess I mentioned it earlier, because usually I was working freelance for like 10 years. I worked freelance from home, so I had, it was different. But then, when I moved here, I was going into a studio every day, so it was like 9 to 5 every day in an office. And so by the time you come home, you're like, oh, it's burnt out. I didn't feel like, and so it was harder. So I would just kind of maybe on the weekends. And so I would start, I was working on this film at that time, but it was like kind of in dribs and drabs because, I would get busy with work because I moved here to be an art director on Over the Garden Wall series. And that was kind of like a lot of work. And so at a certain point, it was like me having to take work home and work on it at nights on weekends too. So it kind of, that kind of like filled, took away all my free time. And also because it was, I had a lot of freedom on that show to do it was very creatively freeing. Like it was like the first show, one of the first only things I've ever worked on that's been like really creatively nourishing. It was like, wow, this is great. Like, it felt like Cartoon Network was really open to ideas and just they just like let us go with it. It just felt like we were just making this. It felt like we were making this independent project, and like it wasn't like for a big company. And so it felt like it was like, there's a lot of creative. It was creative, so I didn't really feel creatively deprived that I had to make my own film, which is usually the motivation was like, oh, I got to make my own film or else I'll go crazy.
Yeah. If you're getting creatively rewarded at work, you didn't need to put it somewhere else. Yeah.
But I mean, like, I was still working on it in like the time I had, but it was sort of like, again, just difficult to do. So that's why it took so long.
Now, I mean, so when you're working in TV here for so many years, then in LA for the last 7 years, like, I guess it's where traditionally your films were where you would go to try out stuff. And I would imagine that in the filmmaking, you'd try, and that would then inform potentially what you could be doing in your TV work. You would learn new skills, new techniques. Has any of the reverse happened? Like your time at Cartoon Network, when you're working with a different kind of creator, you're working closely with Pat, you're doing all this other stuff. What has informed? What's come back into your own personal work from those experiences?
Well, I mean, yeah, it was both. Like I would learn myself how to do things which would help my commercial work, but it was, I would work. Sometimes I would work with people who were really, really, really good, and I would like learn a lot from. So like the first person who I worked with was really, really good was Graham Falk, who created On Talk of the Funny. Like he was like, just his work was just blew my mind when I first saw it. I just couldn't believe, he was unable to tell you how he did anything. He wouldn't say anything. He didn't talk, right? So he just, but watching him draw and looking at his drawings had so much expression and so much like feeling, and were just so simple but had so much in them that I just was like, I just spent a lot of time just trying to figure out how he did it. So he was like the first big inspiration of person I actually worked with, and then, so I mean, to this day, I still try to draw like Graham, and which is funny because I think I was the only one not the only one, but when he was making On Talk of the Funny, a lot of the artists at the studio hated his work, and it was it was so frustrating, and it really I could tell like it killed him because he said, "Oh, this is getting off topic," but he's like, "Oh, I saw someone looking through the model sheets and the look on their face, because they were just like disgusted, like they thought like he couldn't draw. Like, what, this guy can't draw? He just draw with your left hand." And so, and what's interesting is like, eventually, like years later, like how many years later it would have been? It would have been like 10 years later. Adventure Time comes out, and it's basically very much like in Graham's style, that sort of loose style. And he ended up getting hired on the show. I think they thought he was probably like a young person. I don't think they realized that he was like a 50-year-old man. But like he'd been drawing that way forever, and the world kind of caught up to him, right? Yeah. And so now it's really great. He's here in LA and he's working at Cartoon Network. But anyway, I can gush about Graham forever, but he was like the first big one. And, and I worked at Spumco, and I learned a lot doing that. I learned a lot how to do like really solid cartoon construction. Like it was like horrible, but also I learned a lot. And, I worked with Dave Cooper. He was great. And I learned a lot from working with him. So there's like always people like I kind of like, a lot of what I do is like absorb people. Like I try and like absorb their style as much as I can and kind of like incorporate it. So like that's kind of the thing you kind of have to do to be good in animation, I think, is to be able to sort of like do a lot of styles. I'm not like as good as some people at, but I try really hard to sort of like emulate whatever show I'm on and try to be in that style, right? So sometimes it's bad because sometimes you work on something horrible and you kind of you breaks your hand a little bit. Like you have to kind of shake off some of the dust of like working on certain shows, and then you kind of put anyway. Yeah. So that's that. So it's like so you'll see like a lot of films you can almost chart where I've been working. Like Wave for Persephone has a very Spumco influence style because I did it when I was at Spumco and just after, so I was like had that in my hand. And like Pig Farmer, there's a lot of Dave because I'd done a couple of films with Dave, and I kind of had his style in my hand and stuff like that.
Now, and you've been fortunate enough that, I mean, it's cool that, I mean, so you've just cited these key influences in your work that are people you've worked directly with, which is, I mean, like there's like me discovering Bruce Timm in my time in Vancouver was such a big deal for me, and clarified so many ideas of what I thought design should be and all that kind of thing. But I didn't get to work with Bruce Timm. Like I met him once. Later on, it was Miyazaki, and but again, those are from a distance. And I know you. I mean, Miyazaki was also something that for a while was a big part of what you were absorbing as well, and it's still evident in your backgrounds. It's still evident in the light and warmth that's in a lot of that stuff. But to get to actually work with people of that caliber, and to be able to absorb directly from them, and incorporate that into your own work is an amazing circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good people who work in animation, like that kind of go unsung, and you know, like that's the thing. Like Graham no one was really, he was like, no one was celebrating him, you know, outside of like Dynamite bringing him on to do the show. Like, you know, he was just working at doing posing on Caillou or something, you know, for a year, just in the trenches of animation, just like this weird guy that, you know, but yeah, I think there's a lot of good people working animation and stuff. So like, yeah, I have influences outside of, for sure. But you know, I think working with really good people is definitely beneficial because there's nothing better than learning from someone that actually talks to you about what they're doing and stuff like that. It's just, you know, watching someone draw, you can learn a ton just by watching how they actually put pencil to paper or stylus to screen or whatever.
So I'm going to try to do a little bit of this and get back onto some of the actual questions I've written out, because this is supposed to be a proper interview as well. Looking back at these things, I mean, I think there's kind of a twofold here. It's that there's every once in a while you try something within one of your films that is very ambitious. Like, are there any? So, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me was when you did the 2001 effect. In Pig Farmer. Toughest shots. Like, have you ever had anything that you felt that you didn't quite like? Because it's always been about like the effects work that you started to learn to do early on in terms of even like doing the film grain and those kinds of things. Those are things you had to learn as you went, and you were learning After Effects as you went. Those shots are tough, dude.
Yeah.
How like, have you ever been are you disappointed by them? Do you feel like you achieved the thing you set out to do?
I'm disappointed by everything I've done. Like, I mean, nothing is like, oh, like you're obviously going to see everything that's wrong with the work you do. Like, I mean, that slit scan thing was just basically, I mean, it's way easier to do than how they actually did it. Because you can do it in, you know, it's basically just After Effects, and you can just like skew things and, you know, but what's fun about it is learning those techniques and kind of like, you know, trying to replicate them as much as possible. I mean, part of it is like stuff you can't do in TV. Like, what I work in TV cartoons, so there's stuff you just can't do because it takes too long, or like it's too ambitious to ask a different overseas studio or whoever to do something like that. So I just do it myself to try and learn how to do it. Like, I'm always trying to learn how to. My whole life is just learning how to do stuff. So, you know, I'm trying to learn how to animate, learn how to paint backgrounds, learn how to do like cool effects and stuff. So this is like a learning experience.
So is there anything that is there anything in particular that you're proud of?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think overall I'm proud of like the work that I've done. I think, you know, just the fact that I got all this stuff done, but there's nothing I don't think I'd point to individually. Like, it's usually by the time you're done stuff, you just hate it so much.
Yeah, just, I understand.
I'm done with this. I mean, like, I don't know. It's like weird. I can't look objectively at my work and be like proud of it. Like, I'm just like, ugh, you know. like everything. It's like you hate everything you do. Like, I mean,
so
that's normal. I mean, like like that's the thing. Like every artist has that, and it's something. I think it's a good thing to say. Like it's hard. All this stuff is hard. Animation is really hard. Art is hard, and so it's hard to do something that you're going to be proud of because it's so much of a struggle. If it's worth doing, it's going to be a struggle, and so you're probably going to end up finishing something and being like, oh, that didn't work. But the next thing you do will be better because you learned all the mistakes you did. So, like, I mean, I probably said this before, but I mean, when we were working on Garden Wall, Pat and I were convinced, without a doubt, that it was an absolute failure. And it was like a mess. Like, we were just like, oh my God, like, oh, well, we got done. You know what I mean? Like, and it was so shocking that people actually liked it. Like, we were just like, oh, okay, good. Because, I mean, that's the thing. You get into it, and all you can see is your mistakes. So you're just like, oh, why did I do this? Why did I do that? Why didn't I do this? Like, just things you compromise. You make like, oh, I don't want to do that. Let's find an easier way of doing it. And then you kind of wish, oh, why didn't I just take the time to do it? And stuff like that. So it's just a thing. You're not going to be able to look at your work and be proud of it, I don't think. I think if you are, you're not going to learn anything. Yeah.
So conversely then, like, or maybe not conversely, that's not totally appropriate, but like, have you ever, when you sit down and you work out that you're going to be trying to pull off something ambitious, like what are those toughest shots in a simple question, like what are those toughest shots you've had to undertake in the past? What stands out? Like, did you ever worry that maybe you'd taken on too much with some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, because I think usually every film I do, I try to do more complex animation, and so like that one you just watched, the Clockwork Elves, just all that crazy stuff where there's like tentacles that are all swirling around and forming into things. That's like really hard because you have to track every little line. Like, it just stuff like that I make difficult for myself just because I want to try it. So like I'll see some animation that's like really like, wow, that's so cool. Like has so much like cool, complicated stuff going on. And I want to try and do something like that because it's just pushing myself to just try harder things. Because if you just do the same thing over and over, then what's the point? Because it's not like
there was
I'm telling a story that's going to change the world. The stories are stupid. The idea that it's just. For me, it's more about the craft than it is necessarily about the stories. The stories are just kind of like a framework to put the craft on.
Right, an excuse. Because with Yellow Cake, you really did kind of hit a level of production quality that was now sort of comfortable, which was like, it looked like you had really arrived in what you were wrestling with so clearly in the past. And I think since Yellow Cake, there's been a certain like I said, a certain baseline level of execution, of quality in your work. And I mean, I've come to sort of just expect it when you see something, but you are dealing with different levels of intricacy in the shots. You're definitely taking on stuff like that, but you seem to always be able to land in that same space that Yellow Cake set the precedent for. They do become more ambitious in terms of like the content of them and the complexity of it. But I feel as though you haven't worn a struggle maybe the way you did in those previous years coming up to that. Like Persephone is maybe my favorite thing you ever did. But you can see the wrestling match in the drawings. I remember there was that we were talking about ugly drawings. Like, animation's made up of so many ugly drawings. Like it's like pretty animation does not necessarily mean pretty drawings. Now, what I see in your work now is that I can freeze frame and I can see pretty drawings, even though you're still pushing, but you don't have to wrestle with it the way you did then?
Well, I mean, you get better. I mean, Stephanie was the last film I did on paper. That was all animated on paper. So that's like easy. And it was 12 minutes. So that was like a lot of paper. But moving to digital made things easier because you could pencil test like your work right away. You could see, you animate something because I was animating in Flash, like I was drawing in Flash, and then you can just play it back right away and see if the timing works and see if everything kind of works. So that really helped a lot. Like that transition over to just being like doing digital animation as opposed to doing like hand drawn on a disc, flipping pages animation. That's harder. Because if you just want to check if it works, you have to like scan all those drawings in.
Yeah.
To test it, and just everything takes longer, and so the feedback is slower. So yeah, I think probably with Yellow Cake maybe my stuff got better. I guess it got, I don't know, but hopefully it got better, and that probably the reason is because you could just like animate something, pose it all out, press play. Maybe that needs to be timed an extra four frames and do stuff like that. So that might be the reason. Just the digital makes things way easier, right? So I mean, once you transition into that, like who know, like there's a reason why animation in general is better than it used to be. Like it's objectively better now than it was even in the golden era. Like Snow White is good and it's pretty impressive, but I mean, if they had the tools they have now, it would have been like, who knows what it would have been, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, because there's a lot of janky stuff in that. This is like, it's the best.
God, yeah.
There's only so much you can do in the 1930s. Working at a moviola.
And only so many layers deep you can go on the
exactly.
Sliding.
There's only 5 cells deep.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
But
like,
it is. I mean, you seem to achieve a level of consistency with Yellow Cake that you've carried forward, and whether it's the digital tools or whatever, it seems to have been that place where you moved out from. Now, so you were animating in Flash originally. Mm-hmm. You made the switch to Harmony a couple years ago, right?
So it was Toon Boom Animate Pro. So I did Flash, and then I switched over to it's Toon Boom Animate Pro, which I was using up until this film was done in Toon Boom Animate Pro, which was extra hard because they don't support that anymore, Toon Boom. So it got kind of janky near the end. Like I couldn't open. It's hard to open files because it would be sort of like you would crash the program just to open a file.
Fuck.
Because and I emailed Toon Boom about it, and they're like, "Oh no, we don't support that program anymore." I'm like, "What? Who makes a program that doesn't support? That's crazy." Like, "Oh, we want you to go into Harmony." So, okay, yeah, thanks. But this stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna get Harmony now because I'm not gonna do. I had to finish off this with Animate Pro. I had to push it over the finish line with this clunky program, but yeah. There's no other options. I looked around for other animation software, and I couldn't really find anything that was as good as Harmony. Not that Harmony's that good, but they're all bad.
So I guess that was kind of my next question. Are you playing with any new software? Is anything like is anything opening up doors for you that way?
No, I still use Photoshop. I paint all my backgrounds in Photoshop. I do tons of stuff in After Effects, and just animate in Toon Boom, basically. That's it. And then Premiere for doing the editing and stuff like that. I'm not really interested in 3D stuff, so I don't really like. I like the aesthetic of 2D animation. Like I like kind of the limitations of that. I don't like. I don't have these ideas of doing if I want to do like a shot that has like a lot of depth to it, I still want to treat it like it's a multi-plane camera. I don't want to like build a 3D set and move the camera through it. Like feels kind of like that goes beyond like what stuff that I'm interested in. Like I like to paint like a flat background and do that kind of stuff. So I like to work in that language that was invented like 100 years ago.
Yeah, I think like we all think in certain language. Like I have one project I've figured out that actually would be better in CG, but it's only because I want it to look like really like I want it to look like Octonauts, like really simple, straightforward, clean design CG, and be no more elaborate than that. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I think in 2D. Like it's the stories I want to tell, they form that way, and it's just that's I'll always be a 2D person. I mean, I even think I'm not even a color guy. I'm a line guy. And it's just that's sort of the way we're all formed.
It's getting harder and harder too because so many people learn CG and CG just becomes so ingrained into everything. Like, still trying to hold the flame for 2D. Like on the project I'm on at Netflix, like first thing I said to them was like, we're doing this in 2D. because I think that there was talk of it being CG,
Yeah.
just because it's an adaptation of an existing property. I probably could say, but I probably shouldn't. I don't know what my deal is.
Yeah.
It's been announced, but whatever. But it's a fairly complicated property that has a lot of cinematic elements to it, and I think that the original talk was just you have to do it in CG. There's no way you can do this not in CG, and I still feel like that is possible, but it's actually difficult now to find a studio that can do 2D animation. Most of them do CG at this point, so you have to some small boutique studio that still draws 2D, and so it's becoming more of a challenge because there's the Korean studios still work on paper and stuff like that, but a lot of them are kind of set in their ways, and so if you kind of it's difficult to push them out of the sort of stuff they're used to doing. So that's all.
Well, let's use that as a segue. Let's use that to talk a little bit about. I mean, we're going to go a little off topic in terms of the film here. In terms of you were at Cartoon Network for 6 years, whatever it was. You've recently jumped over to Netflix. And without telling us what you're working on, and you moved to Netflix, and were we already in the pandemic when you made the shift?
Oh yeah. It was only in September. I've been there since September, so just 4 months.
Okay, so you've never been in the studio at Netflix?
No, that's weird, because I'm used to working freelance, but to not actually I don't even the studio doesn't even exist because they're making they're starting a new building that's somewhere else. So it's people are like, oh, what's it like to work at Netflix? I'm like, I don't know, because there's actually no one even working on the show that I'm on. It was basically I came on to start it, and so it's just weird because it's sort of I have no concept of what it's like to work at Netflix outside of just talking to people through email and Zoom and stuff.
But so many of your colleagues from Cartoon Network have moved over there. Pat's there, right?
Yeah, but they moved over before the pandemic.
Yeah. But at least you're still it's your people are around you, even if they're not around you.
Yeah, but it's not like I hang out with them.
Yeah.
They could work anywhere. There are people there are a lot of people that I know from Cartoon Network that are there, but they're working from home.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, we're all doing it right now. I'm in Ottawa right now. You're in LA, and
you're doing it too. I thought that Canada had solved the COVID.
No, that's New Zealand. New Zealand solved it.
Yeah.
Canada. We're Toronto is a bit of a hot spot.
Well, no one's doing better. No one is doing better than the U.S. with this stuff. I just want to let you know. I have it on the highest authority from the White House.
From the top, right from the top.
No one is doing better than
okay, so I guess it's kind of pointless. It's kind of pointless to ask you about working at Netflix then. You're clearly getting a lot of freedom. The project you've been brought on is exciting. We're not going to spill the beans about that. We'll do a whole other one of these when we can finally talk about that, because and I'm just racking up the things I want to talk to you about on that one. But
I'm waiting for someone else to spill the beans that they're working on it, and then I'll, because like I say, this project's been announced. I feel like it's not a big deal, but I don't know. This is
you don't want to invite that.
It's too early to even talk about it. So.
Can you talk? So you and I have talked in the past about the experience of working at Cartoon Network and how it differed from your experiences here in Canada. How the various roles of the executives and producers and the artists and the creatives, moving over to Netflix and being brought on specifically for this project. You're saying you're working alone on it right now. There's
2 other people working on it now.
Okay.
There's 2 other people. I'm exaggerating. I was the only one, but now there's other people on it. But
okay.
Still very
good. And so you're what? You're going to be your showrunner, your whatever. You're charged with creating this adaptation.
Yeah, I'm like a co-showrunner. There's 2 showrunners.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But what does that entail? What's kind of? How much oversight is there? Give us just a little bit of a window into this process for you.
Well, it's basically like show running an animated series, which I guess I could talk about, because I did that previously when I was at Cartoon Network. The last thing I did was I was helping run a show there called Tig and Seek. It's just similar to that. I mean, you just basically have to oversee the entire production, right? So I came onto that. Well, I worked on the pilot in the shorts department, and then I got greenlit. I went on to the series. But on that too, when we went to series, it was just me, Mike Chilling, the creator, and Jordan Harris, who was the story editor, and we just had to develop it into a series, because the short was one thing, but making it into a series is another, because you have to figure out like, well, how do we make potentially 100 episodes of this thing? Like what how do we make it so that what's the basically building a story engine, right? So characters, how do we get characters that are going to be sitcom style, that can play off each other, or different, so all that kind of stuff we had to do. So that's the first thing you usually have to do when you're on a show like this, is just figuring out what it is. Like the characters, and the thing I'm working on now, like what are the character arcs, like what do they have to go through, like for this X many episodes, like how do they have to, what's their arc, and how do they all interrelate, and what's the story arc, and all that kind of stuff. That's the first thing you have to do, and then you have to figure out like what it looks like and all that kind of stuff. And then when it's running, you just basically, a lot of your job is just finding people that can do it, which is like a hugely difficult job, which I was never quite used to doing that. Like having to staff up an entire show is really hard, especially now because there's so much production out there. It's hard to find people, so you have to find like people that are kind of new, and like, okay, well, we'll have to make sure we train them up and stuff like that. So like, and so their knowledge level isn't that high, so you have to make sure that they, you spend a lot of time like showing people how to do stuff and all that kind of stuff. So it's hard, So you have to spin a lot of plates, and so that's basically what I do, is like you just basically hiring people that can make the thing, and and your job is to try and keep it from like completely falling off the tracks into the ditch, because that can happen very fast, and does anyway. But
Well, but I guess the question for me becomes then, like, so you're handed this, and you're handed this beloved property, just to tease a little more, and you're told, how do we make this?
Yeah.
Like, is that like how much like are you given any specific outcomes wanted? Are you given any framework? Are you given like how does this work? How does it work?
It's kind of weird, because like I'm not used to this, because usually you're told like you get on a show and there's like you have a season, right, to do a show. This, they're like, oh, we don't even know, like, is it going to be 1 season, 2 seasons? You tell us basically what it is. So we have to figure out, our first job is to figure out how many episodes it is, because it's just basically like, here it is. It's a book basically, and so it exists as a thing with a beginning, middle, and end. So we know the story that we're adapting. It's just like, how do we chop that up into basically chapters, like episodes, and like what are those episodes? And so there's a lot of just like going through and just basically like writing out the entire plot, and then figuring out like all the different character arcs, and what needs to stay, what can go, what needs to be plussed, stuff like that. And so Netflix is good because they're just basically like giving us, it's like we're telling them what we want. And okay. Which is weird. It's very rare. Like I'm used to, at least like even coming on as like the position I'm at, usually you're told something, like the producer will come on and say, oh, here's your schedule, here's your budget, here's the number of episodes you have, right? And so you're stuck with that. This is basically like, you tell us, and tell us, we have this idea for a schedule, but you tell us how you want to change it, And they have a set budget. We have a set budget, but the idea is like, we have to figure out how many episodes it is. It's going to depend. Like if you make more episodes, the quality is going to be less because there's less money to devote. So trying to do it in as few episodes.
So you are given that constraint of like, there's X amount of money for you to spend sort of as. Yeah,
I think there's. We don't. They never said how much money there is, but there's money. There's a pool of money. There's a pool of money that we have set aside for this project. They don't tell us what it is, but it's basically like once they know, they're leaving it up to us to tell them how many.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
that's
that also-
interesting. That's interesting.
It's really weird. Like
Um,
it's a weird
But they don't even
position.
tell you like we're seeing this as probably 3 seasons. They don't give you any of that kind of.
Well, I guess like Netflix has
We
a
know
whole
they like to cancel stuff after a certain point.
yeah, because Netflix is different than like a TV show, like TV network. It's run like a tech company, and so they have all their data, right? They have thousands
Yeah.
of streams of data, and they kind of are like, well, you know, after one season, your whatever their terminology is, your retention it drops off, right? So like even if a show that's popular like Orange is the New Black, the first season does well, second season less, and it diminishes over time, right? So the idea is if you do less seasons, you have a better chance of keeping your audience. So that's the idea. It's like you don't want to say, "Oh, we're going to do 10 seasons of it," because they'll be like, "Well, no one's going to watch that last season," and you want people to watch because it's one story, so it's like a mini series. You want to make sure people watch to the end. So season is kind of
okay. So there is.
It's basically one season that's chopped in half or into 3 parts, depending on how we split it up, and those will be called seasons, right?
Gotcha. Okay. So that so it is. You're trying to. But you're trying to strategize, like if you know there's this much source material, you're then trying to strategize how much do we then, if we comfortably land at 3 seasons, how do we fit this stuff into those 3 seasons?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
basically.
Okay, I should probably stop talking about something that we can't tell anybody what it is.
Yeah, like I don't even know. Like this was actually I don't even know. I know that Cartoon Network had this whole thing about this kind of stuff. It's like you're not supposed to talk to media. Whatever.
I'm not media. Well, I guess no. Whatever. Okay. I'm gonna look at what I've got here to cover. There's a little bit I want to talk about in terms of the role of music in your work, because I do recall back in the day you having a tiny little squeeze box, a little accordion. Right. Music in your work was something that was very homemade in your early work, but always, worked really well with what you were doing in your films. But as your films got more elaborate, as your films got more ambitious, there's only so much handheld accordion you can get away with in these things.
Right.
And this one feels like, I guess I'd have to look at Perry Healing again to see what you were doing there, but like, the first time you used a composer was which one?
I think Pig Farmer was the first one I used a composer, because I had like an accordion for one thing, because I'm not a musician, so I don't know how to play music or anything. So it's the one thing I can't do. So I was trying to find that. I had like a bunch of stock music CDs that I had. I bought like a bunch of royalty-free stock music, like that old industrial music from like the 50s. And so I made Wait for Persephone and Yellow Cake both. I basically plundered those for every song that I could get. So like 20 minutes worth of animation got out of those CDs. But then, I ran out of those. So then I had to I probably need a composer or something. And so, Pig Farmer used a composer. And then this one I just used, I just went on, there's like music licensing sites, and I used licensed music for this one, which is its own whole thing that I had to go through.
Well, yeah, let's. We originally planned on doing this during the TAAFI festival, but it took Nick a little longer to get everything sorted with his music rights, so that's why we're doing it now. We're being prompted to get into perhaps some of the behind the scenes stuff. So so we've all seen the film. I know right now it's probably a little bit of a haze for a lot of people who watched it. Why don't we go back to introduce to us your final version of the film's a little different than what you set out to do when you first boarded it. We have an animatic, which I think we're going to watch. Or do you want to look at board panels?
Yeah, let's do the boards first.
Do the boards. Okay, let's pull up a few boards. Post-its.
That is it really pixely?
Yeah, hopefully people can see things. No, I think we see it more pixelated than they do.
You're not going to see much.
No, let's bear in mind that these are boards that they are for you to work from. So not a lot of on model stuff.
yeah, because I don't have a model at this point. Like a lot of this is just so how I kind of do this stuff is I just start drawing. I come up with like basic idea and I start just doodling ideas, and then I kind of just without any kind of outline or any kind of idea, just kind of like just doodle, and then so that's what these are. These are just like done on Post-it notes and just stuck onto like this is just existing paper that was around the studio, you know, from. That's the original name of Over the Garden Wall. It was Over the Garden Wall animation paper, or storyboard paper. And then it just
Storyboard paper.
Yeah, and it just, you know, plop it all down and just kind of just try and build some kind of framework of a story. And then I just immediately put it into an editing program and just start editing it into an animatic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of it kind of like how you do a documentary. You kind of like, you shoot a lot of footage and then you find the story in the edit. That's kind of like how I do this stuff. I don't board it. I don't have like a board that I work from. The board is just the first step. The animatic is more like what I use. Because I'm the only one working on it, so I don't need to worry about them being pretty drawings or scribbles.
Yeah, you can decipher your own stuff. Yeah. You're starting it with a vague idea, essentially, of what you're trying to do. Yeah. You some kind of rough concept that you want to explore something, but is there anything much more fully formed than that before you sit down and start drawing?
No. Yeah, so I mean, none of this actually made it into the film. This is all like this is like in the film, the character kind of wakes up at the beginning of it, and this is all like before that happened. It's like he gets knocked out and then like kind of wakes up was the idea. So that one down the bottom would be the panel for that's in the film. That one where he's like staring up at. So the stuff like that, like all this extra stuff, like I don't need any of that. Just have him just be on the ground and just wake up. And, you know, so that's the thing. Like you kind of really you board way more than you end up using is the idea. Yeah, you want to treat all these as disposable, as disposable as possible. So you're not married to every. I spent so long on that drawing, I have to use it. It's like no, it's like it took me 5 seconds. So. And the character doesn't even look like the character in the thing.
So how many iterations of animatics do you go through?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of just keep saving over the same version. So I don't know how many. I mean, it takes a while. I don't even know how long the animatic took for this. I think part of it was like just trying to find, like, because I like to edit to music. So it's like finding music was, you know, it's like, I got to find the music to get the right tone. And then I was able to edit to that. So that took a while. And the music that's in there was actually the temp music that I found like 7 years ago. And I was originally going to like, maybe I'll just get a composer to kind of do a sound alike. And then I kind of like soured on that idea because I'm like, you have this thing called temp love where you kind of fall in love with the stuff that exists. So you don't want to change it. So I'm like, I'll just use what I have. It's fine.
Well, let's jump over to the animatic so we can see just how similar they might be. Now, this is one of your like sort of first cut animatics, right?
Yeah, it was like the first animatic I cut. I gave you guys an early one so that you can sort of see the difference because this film, I did it in a weird way where like I don't normally work that way, and I was like kicking myself. Well, why did I not do it the way I normally do it? But I didn't have a finished animatic, and I got impatient. And I wanted to start working on it because it was taking so long, and so I kind of didn't really do like a finished, polished animatic. So when I cut all the animation together, it felt like the animatic, and just there's like nothing there. And then I kind of like sat on it for a while and thought like, I just really got a fresh look at it, and I added a few new scenes and just took out a lot and just sort of rearranged stuff and just took a knife to it, just chopped it up. That's why it's so like disjointed now. But it felt like made it a lot better because it's, the fact that you can't really, it's so, the idea is it's supposed to be kind of like this character, this is, thing. And I kind of wanted it to feel that way. And so like, some of those scenes are like 4 frames long and like probably animated like, 2 full seconds or 3 seconds. And I ended up just using like the best 4 frames from like or something. So I did way too much. So don't do that. Make sure you cut it ahead of time.
How we doing with that animatic, Barney?
It's ready to go. Let's do it.
Go for it. Let's see it.
I actually like that music. I didn't realize I had a different music in there. I'm like, yeah, why didn't I use that? That's my problem.
Look, after everything you went through with the music, we're not going to fuck around with that anymore.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever. But there you go. Work in progress. So
right. So I mean, it's funny because like it's hard to spot what you didn't keep because the big stuff is all there.
Mm-hmm.
Like all your key moments are there, and and everything else is just kind of this shuffling of bits, shuffling of scenes, and the repetition and this and that. So it's more like where you put it. Like, is there anything? So I guess the shower going down upon the main character, is that it? Did that make it through?
Yeah, that's in there. I think I originally had it that it was coming down, and then from a source, like it was, and I just kind of like, I abandoned that. I was like, I don't like that as much, and just, I just kind of, a lot of it was just like cutting it, like getting in the right order was the big job, which is editing. I mean, that's just what editing is. And so a lot of this was just me trying to make it feel like, have the right feeling. Because that feels like, watching is like so slow. There's like, it's very slow. And I just wanted it to just be fast, have a lot of weird moments. And so like, and there's that one part we were talking earlier, you talked about that part where he's climbing and it cuts to two different. I actually animated it twice. Like I had two different so again, I painted one background. I didn't like it, so I painted it again. So I had actually two versions of that scene, and I was like, I just cut those two scenes together, and it was basically because it was on the timeline, so it's kind of like cutting them together, and it would sort of like leave a gap, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, where it's sort of like it pops back in time, and I'm like, that actually. So a lot of it's just accidents that kind of like, well, that worked out really cool. Like, so that helped inform a lot of it too, was like, having that, it's like Easy Rider. If you've ever seen Easy Rider, there's a lot of really cool editing in that where there's a lot of like scenes kind of will flicker in and out before it cuts to the actual scene and stuff. And so it's like that kind of like, oh, I like Easy Rider type of animation, that type of editing. So.
No, it's very cool. Like, and it's interesting to see just how it is just it's just shuffling it and nailing tone, because it's the story's there, and then it's all and because you're moving into this slightly more experimental approach where it's not scene to scene to scene to scene the same way. It appears very freeing, and like you're saying, the comparison to documentary the approach in animation usually is let's lock that animatic, let's get everything tight, and so we've got our story, and then you execute on that, and you're leaving it open. You're still giving yourself freedom in the storytelling by the way you're structuring your perceived outcome. Like your whole process is now shifted away from that typical pipeline.
It's sort of like, have you ever seen Koyaanisqatsi? Those movies, like that. Those are like I love those movies. And there's like no story, right? But the whole experience tells a story that's kind of like
it carries you through.
Yeah, it's a theme, and there's like theme to it, but there's no story and there's no like narrative, no characters. That's kind of stuff that's like, just making films like that in animation is interesting to me, because it's sort of like that's just doing like, just do some really nice animation, like this is as nice, good as I can get it, make it look really visually rich, and just something you can just watch, and then at the end you're kind of like, oh, I don't know, there's something, I don't know what it is, but because it's the thing, like if you watch Koyaanisqatsi and you're like, well, what the fuck did I just watch? Well, yeah. What did you watch?
Maybe it wasn't for you.
The whole point of it is like the question to watch, because this is like, I don't know either when I'm making. I'm not like, oh, this is about this. It's really just a dumb,
Dude, I swear, I really think you should watch
about any of this stuff.
I really think you should watch the and this is going to sound silly, but we talked about it when we did our little pre-talk. I really think you should watch these How to Boost Your High videos by this guy Cynical on YouTube.
I couldn't remember what you said. I went looking for that this morning, but I actually found.
I'll send it to you.
I found that you can watch, because I was looking for stuff. There's 120-minute supercuts of just old Fleischer animation for people that are, I guess, stoned and watch. And it's like, so I have that stuff. I'm like, I'm gonna try and download it, because it's like there's no dialogue in it. It's just the crazy Fleischer moment. I'm like, oh, grab all that stuff. So
that's
I guess.
Awesome.
Which is, I didn't even know that.
I'll send you a link. I'll send you a link because I really think, and this is where I'm full of digressions here. I really think what you were just talking about, with that guiding you through something that isn't necessarily a story, but you're still taking the viewer on a journey, which the Koyaanisqatsi example is perfect. These How to Boost Your High videos, that person is doing that exact same thing, and there's things that feel like they become narrative, that push you in a direction that you don't, and it's an understanding of that process that you're doing in these films. But it's not it's not typical narrative, but it's definitely guiding you through an experience. And the experience of Koyaanisqatsi is very similar.
So like when I was first getting into like film and stuff, I used to I read like tons of film books and stuff, and so there's like the Soviet montage style, like so early Soviet films, like silent films, they were all about the editing, and they learned all these different crazy editing techniques. And from that, I was kind of like, I learned that you can how you put images together makes the image more than the sum of its parts, if that makes sense. Like two images together, depending on what those two images are, tells a story. And if you put two different images together, it's called the Kuleshov effect. I don't know if you heard of this.
Okay.
So
I'll write it down.
The idea was like, you can probably see they actually did film things of it. A picture, a person just staring at the camera, and then they'll cut to something. And depending on what they cut to will change your opinion of what the person was thinking. So person staring at the screen, right? And then it cuts to a baby. And you're like, oh, the person's happy to see the baby. Same thing cuts to like a dead fish or something. Oh, they're disgusted, right? But the image hasn't changed. But
no, it's the exact same image of the
Yeah, so that's the essence of what Soviet montage was, and so like that too. It's like, how do you order these weird images together to tell a story that in and of themselves don't tell a story? So that's the idea. That's the kind of stuff that interests me. This, like, they get into this sort of like zone of just like, how do these images play out together? And I guess that's like Koyaanisqatsi is like that too, and all those like Baraka and all those movies all do that kind of stuff. And it's just, you know, it's just a sensory experience, and so that's the kind of stuff that's interesting to me now. As opposed to, because like, working TV, your whole life is narrative. And I like to do something different in my own stuff. Like, who cares? Like, you're just making a, like, I don't want to make a film that's basically a pilot for a TV series. Like, that's like crazy to me. I don't want to, you know, my films early on, I realized I want to make these things absolutely not commercial. Like, I don't want anyone to, because my experiences at Dynamite were, you know, you work on something and the owner of the studio would come in and be like, we're going to make it into a show. Like, it'd just be someone's doodle on, this is going to be a show. And it's like, that kind of like was kind of, you know, so I like deliberately did stuff. There's no way she could, even though she tried actually, but, you know, so that might also be going back to early on, like what informed me is like trying to do stuff that was anti-commercial.
I'm going to keep looking over the comments to see what Troy says. We're going to do one of these. We're going to get Troy, and we're going to get Tavis, and you and me, and we're going to do one of these, and we're going to talk about Angora napkins, and we're going to talk about
on Dynamite cartoons and how that shaped my entire life from then on.
All right, we're getting prompted again. Rough designs. Come on.
Because now I work in I'm in a completely different animation industry. Like, you know, I had worked in Ottawa, you know, animation industry for a long time. Now I'm in like the LA industry. There's all new people, and you know, kind of like some of the same things because they're all like young people, and it's like, you know, I just have my bitter experiences, and I'm like, you know,
seen it all before.
Let me tell you, but you know,
that's because we're the old men in the room now, Nick.
Yeah, I 100% am. I'm absolutely. Last show I was on, I was absolutely the oldest person on the show. Well, no, there was a sheet timer. Our animation director was like,
of course,
had been in the industry forever. He was like 70. He was really old.
Okay.
Like, what's his name? Now I'm blanking on his name. But anyway, he's like an industry vet. But yeah, apart from him, he wasn't really in the crew. He was like we would freelance and stuff. But yeah, I was like definitely the oldest person on the show. Like, there was people who were like
and Graham.
No, Graham didn't work on the show I worked on.
Okay.
I tried to get him, but he wouldn't leave.
Okay, we're getting prompted again. Rough designs. Let's pop those up, Barney.
So this is just trying to figure out what the character looks like. So basically, the character, I don't know if anyone remembers, there's an old cartoon that used to show on TV Ontario, so this is probably a lot of Canadians here, on TV Ontario, called Jeremy or Culverall.
Jeremy the Bear.
Yeah. So I kind of like that. So I was kind of like, I should make it look like that character. So it has a lot of like influence from Jeremy. That's why he's like orange and has that round button nose and stuff like that. So that's it. This is like a primitive, like it's supposed to be, the idea is like, it's like a prehistoric person character, like from the prehistoric era, right? Because it's like the dawn of time, quote unquote. And so, yeah, just kind of like that. So that's why I got a bone. So this is just me trying to figure out the character design and color and stuff before you start. So after boards are done, trying to figure out what the character looks like and stuff. So yeah, that's more the final model. But then I was trying to do different color variations, but that doesn't show up well against a lot of green, so I just made an orange.
Yeah. It's got to pop a little more.
Yeah. So that's it. You know, that's. Yeah,
I want to see a.
I don't do a lot of design. How I work is. Oh, sorry. How I work is like, I do rough storyboards, and then I do layout. Then I'll do like finished layouts. I won't do like a finished clean board. I would go from scribbly board to just layout, where I figure out the background and character, positions and everything, and then I just
that's how they do it in Japan. That's the anime way.
Yeah.
But boards and layout are almost interchangeable.
Boards. Yeah, but they have a lot of finished more. Like you see the boards that are like really nice. I don't do nice boards. Personally. I don't want to do the same drawing twice. That's the idea. You want to just do the drawing one time.
I'm gonna make a request. I have my Super Science Friends little guy here. I want to see your diamond head, freakish eye gem guy. That's like I want to see merchandising. I want to see the most ridiculous merchandising that ever happened. I want to see the eye diamond fella with little bendy arms and a detachable top of his head, and goop can come out.
Right.
It's time to monetize, Nick.
Well, go ahead and make it. I make my films with Creative Commons. I mean, as long as you give me attribution, you can whatever.
We'll sell them on Cartoon North. We'll sell them on Cartoon North, and we'll this is a whole new venture. Obscure, super obscure action figures. Okay, I think
we're gonna watch. Yeah, except on some weird Russian dub of it that gets 10 billion views.
Well, someone already made a comment here about ripping this thing and putting it up on some Iranian site.
That's happened. Like most of my stuff that I've done has gotten way more views on other people's channels.
Yeah,
Picture has been redubbed like 1 million times, and it's like someone will send it to me and be like, some Russian thing has stolen your video, and I look at it, it's got like 10 million views. I'm like, whatever.
I'm sorry, man.
That's okay. I mean, it's not like, if people are watching it, it's fine. It's just weird that happened. Like, how did they get that many views?
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Yeah, anyway, there's no way to predict this shit. It's just yeah,
because like I say, I think I don't care about copyright necessarily. Like as long as people aren't stealing it. I think most of the time, people do call them out, and they end up like having to either take it down or at least attribute me to it, and that's all I care. It's like, just don't steal it.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah, just don't. Yeah, at least acknowledge the creator.
Yeah.
Credit the artist. Credit the artist. We're closing in on 11 o'clock. Why don't we have another watch of the film, and then we'll see about taking a couple questions before we wrap this up. Okay? Barn, do you want to fire up the film again? And now that we've all had a little bit of time to digest it from the first watch, we've talked a little bit about it, we can truly appreciate it for whatever the fuck it is.
That's right. Let's do it.
You're gonna Okay, we're back. So we're going to try to take some questions, but the lag is going to make it a little bit weird. Barney, have you spotted anything along the way that would be questions in the chat that I may have missed?
Not yet. No, there's not a lot of good ones yet.
No. It's just chat. It's just So we'll let we'll hopefully a few of them come in here now. In the meantime, you're going to be releasing this thing on.
I have a question.
All right, Barney's got a question.
If the jewel-headed guy hadn't got whacked with the tomahawk, would shit still have went down, or would they have just been friends and had like tea?
Oh, are we?
I think Nick.
Can you hear him?
No, Nick, you're muted.
Nick.
Oh, I just told you, and I don't want to repeat it.
Oh no.
No, I don't know. I guess the idea is it's like this character is enlightened and comes to pass enlightenment onto other people, and they reject it, and the rejection of the enlightenment causes everything to go bad. So I guess if it survived, everything would be perfect. We'd be in the garden.
Right, so that's the moment that dictates the fate of mankind.
That's right.
Yeah.
So in the reaction with violence,
that's the
path we choose.
Thinking. Yeah, that's the thinking there.
That's some deep shit, dude.
And in the boards,
I'm gonna have to get high now and watch this.
In the boards, when he got whacked, then his brain guts went into the fire, and that rose up. But in your final one, it didn't do that. Was that because they were nowhere near the fire, I guess, at that point?
Yeah, I guess so.
Hard questions, yeah.
I want to make more sense, actually, but I just didn't think that. Once I was going, it was just more about it coming out, and I don't know. I don't put a lot of thought into this stuff. That's the problem.
Well, no, you're leaving it open to interpretation. You're channeling. You're just a vessel, Nick.
I think when I do the board, there's way more scenes in there, and I'm like, well, I don't, I try and cut out as many as I can, so it's, it's probably more explicit in the boards what's happening because it's put more scenes in, and it's I don't want to have to animate all that stuff, so what's the least amount of work I can do to get the story across?
The first question has popped up is, do you think about the apocalypse a lot?
Do I think about the apocalypse a lot? I mean, sure. I don't think about. I, I mean, I don't even know what the apocalypse actually is. Are we in one right now?
Yeah, I think we're kind of living through it, aren't we?
We're in a slow motion apocalypse right now. I mean, like,
Yeah.
so I think a lot of it is just, you put stuff in your art that is disturbing to you personally, and then if you put it in your art, it's sort of like you can control it. You have some control over that. That's the idea. I think it's like therapy or something. If you have disturbing things, like, because all of it is like super scary. That like environmental destruction is like horrifying and all stuff. So if you put it in your work, at least it's like it feels like you have some control over an uncontrollable world or something. That's my rationale for why I do some of this stuff.
I gotta ask you. I mean, because you've been down in LA for all these years now, and this is going to be. I mean, maybe it's overthinking, but like I've seen the pictures you shared of your own life in terms of you look out your window and there was fire out there.
Yeah.
You explained to me a couple weeks ago that you had to go and mail something and you couldn't find a mailbox. And when you finally did, it was like there was 2 weeks of mail backed up in it. And that's completely because someone like, the fucking, go ahead.
Yeah. So weird thing about that is, so this is getting back to the music thing. I had to like mail a check to the music companies, why it ended up taking a long time. So LA, they don't have mailboxes. There's like no mailbox around. You got to walk forever to find one. Not like in Canada, there was one on every corner. So I had to like walk a few blocks to a post office. It was a super sketchy looking post office. It looked boarded up. I don't know. I think just again because they're defunding the post office or something. So I went to put the letter in the mailbox, and it was stuffed full. There was like boxes of stuff inside it. It looked like a garbage can. And I'm like, okay. And I put the thing in there, and then I kept emailing the music license company. Did you get my check? No, I haven't got it. Blah blah blah. When a month went by, and then I was like, I actually realized that I had 2 pieces of music that I didn't remember that I used 2, so I had to like send them another check. So I was like, you know what? I'll send them a first check again. And I found a different mailbox that was on a street, a busy street, put it in there. 4 days later, the checks went through, and that first check has still never gone through. So that just, I don't know what happened.
This is what I'm saying, dude. You're yeah, and I mean, I don't want to necessarily say that this is what you're putting out in your films, but I mean, your films have taken a very dark turn, and they already had started. But you're also literally looking out your window and watching the hillside burn down, and you're seeing the infrastructure of society being defunded and stripped away so someone can protect their options in an election. I would have to say, how can you not be thinking about the apocalypse in one way or another, living in the time and place that you are right now?
I think, like, I mean, it's not that different than how it's been my entire life. It's been like this. I mean, like when me and you were kind of the same age. I mean, you remember when we were in school, the whole thing about the rainforests being they're chopping down the rainforests. Oh no, you know what I mean? That's still going on. Even like, and now it's like what was horrible in like the 80s when they were talking about how the rainforests were being chopped down. I mean, there's probably like nothing left now of like that was paradise compared to what it is now, and just stuff like that. And when I was a kid, they talked about, global warming is a thing, like it's going to keep getting hotter, and it was like, oh, you're like scared. You're like an 8-year-old kid. They keep telling you like the world's coming to an end, and it's like, what's changed? Global warming? No, I don't think that's real. 40 years later, and it was like old news when we were told about it. 40 years later, and it's like people are like, you know what? I think the science is still not decided on that one.
Dude, I'm sitting here in the middle of Ottawa in the middle of December, and there's no snow on the ground. So
right,
yeah, it's bananas.
Yeah.
Okay, actual questions are happening over here.
Okay.
I'm gonna Oh, okay. What are the technical software limitations or hiccups you wish the software companies would fix? Are there anything specific in what you're doing? Are there anything that you're getting caught on right now that you wish that it would have a solution that you can see?
No, I mean, I think just for me, a lot of times software is way more complicated than what I need it for, but that's not because, stuff is being made for me, but I mean, even like Toon Boom's animation software is way more complicated than it needs to be. Like they tried to make it for every contingency of animation. And so it just makes these cumbersome programs. Like, can't you just make it for, like, they should have just done like a couple of different softwares. Like they have, instead of Harmony, they could have had Toon Boom traditional animation and Toon Boom like puppet animation separate, 2 different programs. That's just me. Like, I mean, whatever. They have X sheets. Who uses the X sheet in Toon Boom and Harmony? Like, come on. Why do you need that there? There's a timeline. What do you need with X sheet? It's crazy. But they make it so that, I mean, I don't know if they've changed. I haven't really used Harmony, but I know Toon Boom Animate, they still acted like the X sheet was in existence, so you couldn't like do a new drawing. This is getting technical, but like do new drawings because it was like, oh, rename the same as on your X sheet, so it'll swap out a drawing that exists, and it's super cumbersome. So I'm not a big fan of Toon Boom. Yeah, Adobe's pretty good.
Because I do feel like you could have more tiered software, like you're saying. Like if here's the deluxe package, and here's the the other versions of it.
They kind of do that, but they do it in a weird way that it's like, they just try and make it so that you have to buy it. Like, oh, well, if you want the really good brushes, you have to get the fancy one. And it's like, well, it's kind of silly. I mean, whatever. I don't know anything about software companies and how they think.
Well, and you've always kind of been like, your whole career has been workarounds, trying to figure out to do the thing you want to do.
Yeah, because like
whatever the tools are without.
Yeah, like with Photoshop, I'm convinced there's not a single person in the world that knows everything there is to know about Photoshop. You only know what you need to know, right? You learn by doing it. Like there's certain tools that you're never going to use and don't know how they work. I mean, maybe there are some that not use it, but most people kind of just know and everyone has different tricks. So you kind of like, oh, I never thought of doing that. It's, oh yeah, this is really cool. But yeah, usually you just end up working around a lot of these software. So I don't know. I don't know. Did we answer that?
So there's 2 questions. Yeah, I at this point I'm kind of having to keep it moving along because I've spent so much time digressing with you. There's 2 questions here that actually go very well together. Christina is asking, at what point do you decide if an idea is worth creating? I mean, there's I think that we're looking at this, like when as these ideas come through, there's a commitment point to it. And then Spencer has a follow-up question that actually goes very well with is how to maintain your interest and attention on a project over 7 years. Those to me seem like bookend questions, so maybe we'll let you address that.
So, like you have a lot of ideas all the time. Like probably like, oh, you get ideas, but not all of them. I always think it's like a cloud in your head. Like there's all these different ideas bouncing around, but it's like at some point some of them will kind of coalesce into a more concrete idea. And so even like you could start trying to tell a story, start storyboarding something and it just doesn't go anywhere, and so the ideas that are worth pursuing are usually the ones that you can see a beginning, middle, and end. Like you can see it as a thing. So like, I don't know if that answers the question, but the idea is like you have an idea, and if the idea seems like something worth pursuing, you kind of try and make it happen. And if you can't make it happen, then it's probably not worth pursuing, right? That's kind of the way I think of it. Is like you end up getting an idea. Like I have like projects that I've started and gone, into storyboard, even animatic, and then it kind of, I can't get anything out of this. I can't make this work. So he has to kind of like abandon it. And sometimes those ideas kind of will evolve into something else, but that's for me, how I know if an idea is worth pursuing. And then once you kind of commit to it, going to the next one, it's like you just have to force yourself to keep interested in it. I mean, if you like I said earlier, if you like doing the granular work of animation, if you like drawing tons and tons of drawings that don't look very different from each other, and just
you make it sound so sexy.
Well, it is. I mean, it's like if you're doing embroidery or you're doing any kind of art, it's like there's a lot of just the same thing, and if you don't mind doing that, then it's not hard to maintain doing it, seeing it through the end. But you have to. But at a certain point, I always say this: you get to a point in your work that you start to question everything because it's like, you worked on it for like a long time, and then you look and you're like, man, I've worked on this forever, and I'm only this far, and I still have all this to do. And you're like, is this idea even any good anymore? It's like, I've looked at it so many times. You have to kind of like force yourself to not shut that down, because that's when most people give up, because it's like, oh, it's too hard. And you have to kind of like, that happens to everybody, and that happens, never stop happening to you. So you have to like be aware that that's the voice in your head telling you to, that's the part of your brain saying, yeah, maybe this isn't worth doing, but you have to kind of like shut that down. Just say, no, I wanted to start this. I'm going to see it through to the end. And you don't need to worry about it being don't be a perfectionist. I know people are perfectionists, but really just make a million mistakes. You'll think it looks terrible, but finishing it is more valuable than a compromised kind of project that you're not super happy with at the end is 100 times better than a perfect project that isn't finished. If that makes sense.
Well, that's it. If you don't finish it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and at that point, there's nothing to even talk about.
Finishing it because it exists, you have it, it's done. You're going to hate it. You may not want to look at it for a year or two. You look back and you're like, maybe there's something there. Okay, I see what's, and it exists. You have it. It's yours. It exists for better or for worse. And then, go move to the next one.
Okay, there's one more question here, and I feel like it's a whole other topic, but I'm going to ask it from Alicia. How do you feel about the state of the Canadian animation industry? What would you change so that talent didn't feel they had to move to the USA to work on interesting work?
I feel like didn't we talk about this in the last time we had one of these talks? But I don't. So the Canadian animation industry, I have a very mixed feelings about. Like, I mean, it's great that it exists in the first place, because that's kind of a minor miracle, because Canada is such a small country, really, that it has an industry that's so like, big. It produces, animation, but it's very creatively bankrupt because, now I'm going to preface this because I'm actually a hardcore socialist, but I will say that the system in Canada is the animation industry is very much like a socialist system. And I feel like the profit motive kind of helps, like the sense of competition really helps in the US, because I think what I noticed here is a lot of the studios are really want to make, they want to like win Emmys, and they want to like have the best show and have the best ratings, and they're really, really keen on, they just want their show, every show has to be a hit, and they're really, really keen on making shows a hit. And they want to beat all the competition, and what's Disney doing? Oh, we're going to beat them. Oh, what's this company doing? We're going to beat them. And in Canada, it's kind of just like, I'll just make this, and I really feel like they just want to make sure that it makes the money that they get and just goes into the budget, and not a penny more, not a penny less. And we don't care. We don't want a hit. Hit would be a problem, because then that might be a problem. I always feel like if they got a hit, it would be actually a detriment. So they just want to make things that are forgettable, and they just get their tax credit money, and it just, things just are produced in a very, just, it is what it is. And so that's I feel like I was trying to explain this to someone here about, and they were like, man, if you had like a system where the government was just giving you money to make stuff, you could just do anything. I'm like, you'd think. That's what you think, and that's what I think. That's not how it works. It's the complete opposite of that. It's like, it's being run by bureaucrats and people that just don't care about the creativity. If you said to them, I got this idea that's like the stuff, like, okay, it was a huge culture shock when I came to LA and I sat down and we like met with the executives, and they're just like, all the executives knew my name, right? Which is bizarre, because in Canada I never met a network. And when I 17 years in the Canadian animation industry, I might have met one network executive the entire time. There, your studio, all the executives work at the same studio with the artists. They hang out, they take pictures, they talk to you, they know your name. They're, what's that? I just saw what you did. This is great. It's like, whoa, this is weird. And they're like, we really, and like, you're making stuff, and it's like, when do we have to get approval on the stuff that we're doing? Don't worry about it. We just keep going, and they don't even care. Just as long as they check in at certain points. And like the head of the studio, like Pat would pitch garden wall boards to him, and he'd be like, I don't even, what is this? I don't even know what this is. This is crazy, this stuff. Like, he just didn't understand. He's like, whatever. And he was just like, this is the head of the studio, right? This is the chief content officer that's in charge of I was like, are we canceled? He's like, don't worry about it. You know, it's a completely different thing because they have enough trust in the people that they put in. Like, you got an idea, see it through. We trust you, you know, within reason, but you know, they don't like, it's not like the Canadian industry where it's just like run by writers that never seen a cartoon in their life, or, you mean, the scripts you get are crazy. You know, like,
see how good I'm being?
I tell people here, like, I'm like, I worked on 11-minute cartoons with a 30-page script for an 11-minute cartoon. And they don't believe me. They don't believe me that it can be like that. I'm like, yeah. And we beg, can you please have your writers write less script pages? I tried. Like, this is the creator of the show I was on. Couldn't get his writers to write shorter scripts. Because the creator of the show is just considered an animation director. There's writers, and then there's the animation side, and they never talk to each other, and they don't. There's a wall between it, and in the U.S. that wall doesn't exist. You're basically, the writers are artists, and artists are writers, and talk to each other all the time. And, you know. Yeah. So it's totally different. Unfortunately, I mean, maybe it's changed since the 7 years since I've been there, but it's so different here, and that's the reason why shows are better in the U.S. Like you say, like Canada looks to the U.S. is like, what are they doing? Oh, let's do a show like that, and then they just do some weird knockoff of it. They get a bunch of writers to like, let's do an Adventure Time type show. You know, it's like bizarre nonsense. But it's like, you know, I don't know. I have on our last show we brought in a guy I worked with for years, and he's still in Canada, but to do like our animation directing. And every time we get on a call to hand out, we spend 2 hours just like war stories about like how horrible it is, like our experience. And the showrunner is from LA. And he's just like, what are you guys talking about? He just like thinks that we're talking about like an alternate reality, which I guess it is. It's Canada. It's alternate reality. So anyway, sorry.
I've been biting my tongue this whole time. I appreciate someone else saying this for a change. Okay, so Barn is jumping in, and I'm going to say very quickly, thank you, first of all, to Nick. Thank you for sharing your film with us. Thank you for sharing your time with us. I want to say thank you to Barney and TAAFI for giving us this platform to have this conversation. And I want to say thank you to everybody who chimed in, who listened, who put up with my digressions, who waited for me to stop talking so they could actually hear Nick. You guys are eminently patient with me, and I appreciate that all the time. I understand we're going to shift over to the Discord server, Barn.
Yeah, let's do it. And thank you to you, Mike.
If Nick
you did
is
a great
up for
job,
it.
so thank you.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, thanks, everybody.
I'm just happy to be here.
All right, well, I'm going to sign off, but thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
And we'll see you shortly. Thanks, folks, for tuning in here to see Nick Cross's new movie and a little bit of behind the scenes, some of the storyboards, some of the Leicas, some of the design work, hear a little bit of the chat, the differences between Canada and the States, and how to make a cartoon with really rough boards that looks incredible. So thank you. This is Barnabas, the chair of TAAFI, signing off. We'll see you guys on Discord, and we'll see you next time. Cheers. Boom.